Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Today's video features true scary home invasion stories. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. Story number 1. It all started over a year ago, living in my current small neighborhood. It was unusually hot in our house for October. My sister figured it would be a good idea to keep her window open for some air. She was doing homework and I was getting ready for bed when suddenly she bursts into my room. She frantically says that she heard some noises outside, sounds of leaves crunching under a person's steps. I believed it to be an animal, so I walk into her room and stay there for no more than 5 minutes, until I heard leaves crunching too. We quickly glance out the window only to hear the sound of someone running away into the woods. But that wouldn't be the end of the story. During the winter, I enjoy exploring the woods towards the back of my house, climbing trees and traveling further back to the fields. I remember the events very clearly. It had just snowed that night, first snowfall of winter, and I was more than excited to head out there. I did so and climbed my usual tree to get a good view of the property. I gave a cursory glance around me and at the ground when I noticed something strange. Footsteps leading away from my house. This wouldn't be weird as long as the beginning of the footsteps didn't end, pointing straight at my house. I tracked down the footsteps up to a point where there was a rusty wire fence covered in snow where they disappeared. October 2017, it started up again. I was laying in my bed pitch dark, not a light shining through my room when I heard it. My doorknob turning and my door creaking open. My heart stopped, every single possibility of what was rushing through my mind. Keep in mind my door is always shut when I go to sleep. Since I was covered by my blanket, I quickly shot my sister a text. "Did you just come in my room?" She replied with a sharp, "No, I'm all the way in Hillard." My heart began pumping. Faster, faster. I slowly snuck my hand under my pillow and grabbed my police baton, sent a text to my dad and waited. My dad came in my room minutes later with a knife, shot on the lights, and I jumped out of bed. We searched the entire house and found nothing. Alarms set and all doors locked. Impossible. There's no way that happened otherwise. My dad and mom were asleep and my cat would have opened it much faster if it jumped at the doorknob. You best believe I didn't sleep a second that night. Fast forward to December. My relatives are in town staying for a week in the basement. We turn on the alarm and all head to sleep. I stayed up gaming. In the morning around 2:30 or 3, my uncle slowly opened his eyes with a feeling of being watched. His eyes adjusted a bit to the dark before he saw a guy, average height, scrawny, hair flowing in the wind and shivering, looking inside their room through the window. My uncle screamed and they grabbed the baby before taking off upstairs. That morning I was informed of what happened. I looked for footprints and saw only the smallest sign of a footprint. A front toe print made by what I could only assume was a sneaker. My uncle gave me more details. Without me telling him, I looked for footprints and he said the guy was leaning to the left looking in. The footprint matched his story. The left print had a thin line of dirt anyone could have shimmied across. Now that leads to tonight. The night I could swear he or whatever it was had been in our house. I couldn't sleep. Life has been stressful lately, and I was up all night until I tried getting rest. Every night I've had dimly lit Christmas lights hanging in the room, until tonight. I figured the lights must have been interfering with my sleep, so I unplugged them and headed off to sleep. I had my pillow over my head and I started to drift off until it happened. A quick strum of my guitar and the sound of something falling over, with the desperate attempt to stop it from hitting the ground, filled my room. The sound ignited my heart rate. I could feel the presence of someone in my room. Realizing I'd left my baton on my desk, I did the next logical thing. Pretended I was asleep. I tried and laid there for what felt like hours, when in reality it was only a few minutes until I heard a whimper come from my sister's room. imagining this may be the day everyone in my family was silently murdered. But me, I gathered all the courage I had. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and grabbed my baton. I busted into my sister's room and screamed, "Hey!" only to see they were unharmed. My sister asked me what the hell I was doing, and I just stood there, looking into the pitch black of my room, and cried. I've never in my life felt the overwhelming emotion of believing my family was going to be taken from me until today. I sit here in my chair writing this in hopes to document my experiences and try to come to some logical conclusion. All I can come up with is that there's some guy stalking my family and perhaps sneaking into our rooms at night. If anything else happens, post it to this thread. I'm going to sleep. Story number 2. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school. The year was 1998. My parents and younger brother were out of town, and I was basking in the freedom of being home alone for an entire day. I had spent most of that time shut up in my upstairs room watching TV while I chatted on the phone with my friends. Because three-way calling. Oh my God. After a few hours of MTV watching and phone chatting, I decided it was time to relax in a bubble bath and read a Stephen King novel, because that was my favorite pastime. My bedroom and the bathroom were side by side on the second story of a very large 3-story house. Our house sat on the edge of a small town. My dad was the local pastor of this town, so we would have random people show up at any hour of the day or night. Most of the time they were in need of food and or money, and sometimes they could be very persistent. I was instructed that when home alone I was not to answer the door. Just stay out of sight until the people left, then go on about my day. This strategy had worked for years, so why change it now? On this particular day, all had been quiet. The bathroom was upstairs and out of sight of any doors. It was the only interior door that was locked, so I always felt relatively safe in there. I shut off my TV and hung up the phone. I then proceeded to take a nice hot bubble bath. Once the tub was filled, I climbed in and started reading my book. I got a chapter in when all hell broke loose. I heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the kitchen below me, the room to the left at the foot of the stairs. Also the room with the back door, in which it consisted of a giant double pane of really old glass. My mother was always scolding us for shutting the door too hard. She was convinced we would break it. The sound of breaking glass is followed by a loud voice, a man's voice, a man that was not my father. I got out of the tub as quickly and quietly as possible, grabbed a towel, closed the bathroom door, and slid the lock over. I stood at the door listening for what felt like an eternity. Then again from the kitchen, a man's voice. This time quickly followed by a woman's voice that was not my mom. Jesus Christ, 2 intruders were in my kitchen, and there I stood butt naked, dripping wet, and with nothing but a bath towel to protect me. What was I supposed to do? I looked around the bathroom for weapons, and the best I could come up with was a plastic-handled toilet plunger. At this point, I realized that I hadn't heard anyone for a few minutes. I decided I was going to sneak to the top of the stairs and listen. Maybe they left after realizing we didn't have any items with any street value. Armed with the toilet plunger, I unlocked the bathroom door and tiptoed to the top of the stairs. Within seconds, I heard them talking in the kitchen. I decided I needed an evacuation plan and better weapons. I tiptoed back into the bathroom and relocked the door. I knew I didn't have much time until they would come to explore or rob the upstairs. I knew that when I got to the bathroom of the stairs, I would be in full view of the kitchen, and the stairs creaked so they would definitely hear me coming. I also knew that the base of the stairs led to the front door if I made a quick right, so I could get down and out the door before they realized what was going on. But if they heard me coming, I might have to fight for my life. I needed to find a good weapon because it was going to be a 2-on-1 fight. I snuck back out of the bathroom and into my bedroom. The whole time I heard them in the kitchen. The best thing I could come up with in my bedroom was a lighter and a bottle of hairspray. I'll melt these fuckers' faces off. I went back to the top of the stairs and listened again. They were still down there. I counted to 3 and made a run for it, lighter and hairspray at the ready. I reached the landing and turned to glance at the kitchen. That's when everything became glaringly obvious. Sitting in the middle of the kitchen table was my father's pager for the squad. The male EMT was telling the female dispatcher that they had just arrived at the hospital. I let out a huge sigh of relief and started laughing hysterically at my own stupidity. The door wasn't broken and I was still home alone. Story number 3. My boyfriend and I, as well as our good friend, were living in an apartment in our city. To initially get into the large complex, there are security gates that need an access key, then another security door to get to the stairwell of ours, and our neighbors' apartments, then the unit doors themselves. There had been a few occasions where I'd come home and realized the door to the stairwell was just sitting on the frame without actually closing. I always tried to make an effort to close it properly as I came and went. On this night, my boyfriend, flatmate, and another friend were having drinks at our place on a weeknight, and it was about 11 when our friend who lives up the road took off for the evening. We went to bed like normal. It must have been 2 in the morning and I woke up suddenly because I thought I could hear someone treading on the carpet. Shortly thereafter, I was confronted by the silhouette of a guy standing in our bedroom. I couldn't make him out because my eyes were adjusting to the light, but I immediately thought it was our flatmate. We must have his car keys. It's funny how the brain tries to make sense of a strange situation. To me, the silhouette looked remarkably like our flatmate, who was quite a small guy of similar height and build. I stared at him and he slowly backed out of the room. Then I saw him peer around the door again. I couldn't make out his face and I said, "Yeah, Josh, what do you want?" It was the lack of response that scared me the most. My flatmate would have just explained what he was doing. He left the doorway and my heart started pounding. So I elbowed my partner who woke up and said, "I think there's someone in the house." I'm surprised at how quickly he got up, still half asleep. I watched him leave the room for the lounge, and then really loudly he said, "What the fuck? Who the fuck are you? Get the fuck out of my house." Turns out this guy was hiding around the wall waiting. I don't think he was expecting to be confronted by my large partner. This guy then bolted for the door, which he left on its hinges while saying, "Sorry." I started screaming. It was insane how close a stranger had been and how vulnerable we both were. My boyfriend said it was an Asian man. Turns out he had gone into our flatmate's room first because the door she usually keeps closed was open. He sleeps with his headphones on and hadn't noticed a thing. Looking back, I think we should have called the police right away, but we left it until the next morning. There was nothing missing. I think he was just an opportunist. We were told that security found that he had checked all the doors along the stairwell until he got to ours, which was stupidly left unlocked. Normally, my boyfriend is really good about locking the doors. We ended up with a deadbolt as well as a chain lock, and we never take home security lightly anymore. We have since moved on. I have no idea what he was after. He got in through the faulty door to the stairwell and must have jumped our gate. Story number 1. This happened a few years ago when I was 7 or 8. My family went to the movies very late in the day. We were watching Star Wars or Jurassic World. Anyway, we went home with our leftover candy and soda, talking about our favorite characters and scenes. It was dark outside when we got home. We got inside and our big giant schnauzer dog was all riled up. This was really strange because she's usually a big teddy bear and doesn't get mean. We walk into the kitchen and the window looks like it was forced open. Cups on the counter were knocked over. What we think happened was someone broke into our house and the giant guard dog scared him away. At the time, I didn't realize how scary that was. I was just trying to calm down my dog. I thought about it a couple days ago and I get chills thinking about what could have happened. My parents changed the locks on the windows, and we rewarded our dog for her valiant duties. Story number 2. Around 2012, I lived with my parents for a year in my early 20s. In the summer, they would go away to their summer home on the weekends. And not being a fan of leaving the city that frequently, on those weekends I would often have the house to myself. Having lived in apartments for a few years, and being someone who reads true crime, moving back to a multi-story house freaked me out. If someone broke into the basement window, for example, and I was in my bedroom, I knew I would never hear them come in. If someone broke in while I was out and waited for me, there were plenty of places for them to hide. So something I'd do out of habit when I'd come home to that empty house was to yell, while still in the front door, "Get out of my fucking house. I'm calling the police." I still do that sometimes if I'm visiting and find myself home alone. I figure that if someone's in the house, I'll at minimum hear them moving around when I shout. If there was no one in the house, then there would be no one to hear my crazy yelling. Honestly, I really knew that the odds of someone being in the house were extremely low, and the main purpose of yelling was for my own peace of mind, so that I could sleep that night feeling confident that no one else was in the house. Another thing I do when home alone, day or night, I'd compulsively check the lock on the interior of the front door. I knew what it looked like, locked or unlocked, because I grew up in that house. Anytime I was passing from my bedroom on the second floor to the kitchen or living room on the first, I'd pass by that front door, and I'd give it a glance to check its position out of habit, and it was always locked. One of these weekend nights when my parents were out of town, I was lying in bed on my computer on the second floor when I heard a sound on the first floor. It sounded like someone was moving around. I distinctly remember thinking it sounded like it was coming from the front hall. I decided to do my own little routine yelling. Get the fuck out of my house, like I said earlier. I called the police. I didn't hear anything else. I didn't often get freaked out by sounds coming from inside the house, but it had happened before, so I chalked it up to my own paranoia. I forgot about it completely. An hour or so later, I went downstairs, probably to get a snack or something in the kitchen. Like I always did when home alone, every single time I walked by that front door, I glanced at the lock on the door. This time I froze. It was unlocked. I know I had checked that door at least a few times earlier in the night while puttering around the house. I know it had been locked. The thing that makes it extra hard for me to dismiss the lock as simply an oversight on my part, something I somehow missed multiple times, is the sound that I heard coming from that exact part of the house, the sound that stopped when I yelled. I put the chain lock on and slept with my chair under my doorknob that night. Now, the thing that's extra weird to me is I figure whoever went into my house that night had to have a key to just let themselves into the front door. I know my mom gives out keys to a lot of people, friends, people who worked in the house. Honestly, anyone who needed to would get a key, and I highly doubt my mom would ask for it back. She's not very careful about these things. Also, many of the people who have my parents' keys would have also known that my parents would be away that weekend. Or it's possible they knew I'd be home alone, and I took them off guard with my yelling. I've got no idea. I have no idea why the hell they were in my house that night, because they knew they weren't expected or invited, whoever it was. Anyway, I know this isn't a super exciting story, but it happened and I felt like writing it somewhere. Story number 3. In 2007, I was 17 at the time this happened. I was home alone the night with my mother. It was a boring evening and I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have a habit of looking out the window just to see what's going on and look what's going on outside. However, that night when I looked out the window, I noticed this man was standing across the street. Looking at him, I was confused to why he was just standing there staring at my house. He was dressed in all black and not moving, just staring. I yelled out to my mother, "Hey, there's someone outside looking at the house." She went and looked towards the window and was just as confused as I was. My mom closed the blinds and shut the lights off so the man from outside would not be able to see in. We checked and peeked through the blinds, and he was still there but had moved closer. She picked up the phone and called the cops. We explained what was going on. They said they would come check it out, and if he was still there, they were going to send someone in to keep the lights off and the doors locked. We looked out the window again slowly. We noticed the man in black was gone. We let out a sigh of relief. We called the police back and they said for the next days to keep a lookout in case he was to come back, and that they would send a police car to check the area out. That was one of my creepiest experiences I've ever had. Story number 4. One night around 8 years ago, my friends and I watched Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and we're talking about how it would be cool to enroll in a martial arts or self-defense class. Little did we know that we might need it if things went a violent turn that same night. One of my said friends was my roommate. Our room, which was literally just a bedroom with 2 bunk beds, was at the rooftop 5th floor of a dorm building. There were only 2 rooms on this floor, including ours, and the other half is an open area with a table, chairs, and a washing area. Our 2 other roommates were not yet there when we got home, and even when we were getting ready to sleep, so we figured they might be staying overnight somewhere else. I'm not sure how much time has passed, but I woke up to the sound of our door slowly opening. My bed was on the top bunk on the opposite side, while my roommate's bed was on the top bunk adjacent to the door. I figured it was just one of our roommates. I didn't want to engage in small talk, so I just closed my eyes again. However, I remember opening my eyes ever so slightly, because I was confused when I didn't hear any sound that would indicate our roommate entering the room. I saw that our roommate was still standing outside our door, which was left ajar. From my position, I couldn't see the upper half of her body because the other bunk was blocking the view. A person walked to the open area outside our room, right next to the table just beside our windows. I still wasn't alarmed at this point because we would sometimes hang out there before going into our rooms. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. My alarm bells finally went off when I could feel the light, which I guessed was from a phone's flashlight, shining on my face. My instinct told me to keep my eyes closed, so I just shut my eyes and somehow I fell asleep again. I thought that it was just a bizarre dream, so you could imagine my horror and confusion when I saw the door was left wide open. When I woke up and the other 2 roommates didn't seem to be back during the night. My roommate was a deep sleeper and slept throughout the night. I recounted the strange events of the evening. We checked if there was anything missing with our things. We both had our phones under our pillows, but her wallet was missing. Later that day, we found the wallet laid down on the hallway of the 4th floor. Her cash was gone, and her wallet photos were taken from the pocket and placed beside the wallet. This is one of the creepiest things that has happened to me. I don't want to imagine what the person was planning to do if I decided to open my eyes that night. Story number 5. I live in a pretty good community where things are relatively peaceful. Breaking and entering is a blue moon around here. However, it still finds a way to happen, and it scared the living hell out of me. This happened late at night, around 1 or 2 a.m., and everyone in my house was zonked out, including myself. The whole residence is dead silent, till the crack of shattering glass rings through the house, instantly waking me up. Now I'm no fighter. I'm a scrawny 16-year-old, and I know damn well whoever got through that window could easily overpower me. But even so, I still grasp the knife under my pillow. As I'm doing this and trying to stay calm and remember where I put my phone, I hear 2 sets of really heavy footprints land out in the living room and started walking around. My heart skips a beat knowing there's not 1, but 2 people that have just broken into my house, and I realize I left my phone on the desk in my room. Now don't get me wrong, I love this house with all of my heart, but the floors creak if you so much as drop a toothpick on it, so the cops are out of the question. I hear my door creak open and I hear a deep, gruff voice that I've never heard in my life say, "If anyone wakes up, take them out by any means." My heart stops. I do absolutely everything I can to keep my breathing under control, and I hold my knife as if it's the only thing I've ever cared about. I hear my TV being hoisted out of my room, and I was hoping this meant they would leave. After taking most of the electronics in the home, they left and I called the cops. I just cried for the rest of the night knowing how utterly close I was to death. Story number 6. A bit of background info. I currently live with my parents, and our home is 2 stories. There is an in-law apartment on the first floor, along with some other things: garage bay, furnace room, laundry room. I live in the in-law apartment. My dad has been working with a contractor, some of his employees, to replace the wall-mounted air conditioners. There have been a lot of people in and out of the house. The day this happened, my mom and I went out to do some grocery shopping. My dad stayed home to direct the contractors. We got back and discovered they were gone. My dad had gone to bed, so my mom and I made some dinner and hung out upstairs for a little while. I mentioned offhandedly to my mom that our cars were still outside, and I talked about a woman whose car and house had been broken into down the road. This creeped her out and she sent me downstairs to check that the front door was locked. It wasn't. In fact, it was just a little bit ajar. I closed it and locked the deadbolt, then went back upstairs. We stayed upstairs and watched TV for a few more minutes, till I heard a loud thump downstairs in the in-law apartment. I assumed that this was my cat, getting antsy because I wasn't feeding her. I told my mom that I was going to go downstairs to feed her, and then come up to finish the show. As I walked down the stairs, I heard another louder thump, which I thought was my cat getting excited it was food time. I opened the door and she was nowhere to be found. Really unusual for her, so I was confused. I walked into the kitchen to look for her and noticed something that made my heart sink. The furnace door was closed. I never close the furnace door, neither do my parents, because we want the cat to be able to get inside to catch mice. I recognized then that the thump that I had heard could have been the heavy furnace door closing. I was completely frozen, convinced that there was someone right behind that door hiding from me. Now, I'd seen a lot of scary movies lately. It could have been my paranoia, but this felt awful and just not right. I knew that I didn't want to give this potential person any reason to open the door. I put on my best acting skills, pretended that I didn't notice anything amiss. I did some baby talk to my cat and scooped out some food for her. I was super creeped out whenever I had to let the door out of my sight. I was basically keeping it in my vision at all times to see movement. After feeding the cat, I went back upstairs. I grabbed my mom and explained what had happened. She was skeptical again because of the scary movies. She thought maybe one of the contractors had closed the door. Seeing how off-put I was, she went to go wake up my dad. My dad grabbed his gun and went downstairs. He screamed at us to call the cops and get somewhere safe. We hid in the bedroom and we called the cops, who showed up and searched the entire house, not finding a soul. My dad explained to me after they'd gone through the house why he said to call the cops. He saw that the furnace door and the back door to the outside were both open. I was at home alone in my previous apartment, in a not-so-great neighborhood. My apartment was on the ground level and my bedroom window faced a back alley. A dumpster sat less than 2 car lengths away, where homeless people often rummaged. Just before dawn one morning, I heard a tapping at my window. My back was to the window and my eyes were now wide open. It was still dark outside. I sleep with my lamp on and my worn-out vertical blinds were missing a slat, causing a 6-inch gap. So I knew that whoever or whatever the source of the tapping could see me lying in bed plain as day. The tapping was brief, maybe 5 or 6 taps. So I spent the next 5 seconds or so frozen, bizarrely trying to convince myself it was something or anything else other than a person watching me and tapping on my window. Maybe it was an animal, but then came more tapping. Now I was faced with the terrifying reality that someone had been watching me through my window in the dark for God knows how long, and now decided to tap on my window. Had one of the homeless people become aggressive during their dumpster dive? Something told me that nothing good would come from turning around and looking out that window. If he got me to look at him, what then? Remember, my back was to the man, so I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes and pretending I was too groggy to hear him. I stood up and hazily made my way out of my bedroom, as though I was going to the restroom or something. Once I was out of his sight, I ran to the phone to dial 911, considering whether to forget any embarrassment of being in my t-shirt and underwear and bolt out of my front door, which was out of sight from the intruder. I wasn't sure I could outrun whoever it was, or whether anyone would help me if I couldn't. Before I could make a decision, I heard a loud pop of my window being pried open. I thought my heart would jump from my chest. At the same time, I could hear my upstairs neighbor Mike descending down the stairs. I opened my door a few inches and peeked out to ask him for his help. Mike was a large man, and I'd heard he was trained in martial arts of some sort. He didn't hesitate to respond, hustling to the back of my apartment to see what was going on. Within a few seconds, I heard rumbling and someone being thrown against the wall into the bushes. A few moments later, Mike came around to my front door, telling me not to worry about seeing that man again. He'd beaten him up pretty badly. I wanted to believe Mike, that the would-be intruder was maybe dumpster diving, but that he would hopefully never venture this way again. But it wasn't a homeless person. According to Mike, when the guy escaped, he ran to the front of my building, hopped into a red sports car, and sped off. My neighborhood wasn't a red sports car kind of place. The police later told me that the intruder was likely someone who'd seen me out somewhere and followed me home to find out where I lived. To Mr. Window Tapper, I still wonder what you would have done if you'd gotten inside before Mike caught you. I wonder if you still follow me. And because of that, I often find myself wishing that Mike had put an end to you. If you've found out where I now live, let's not meet again. Story number 2. A few months ago, my parents decided to go on holiday together for 2 days. My brother and I were fine with being home alone, and we didn't want our grandparents to babysit us. My parents agreed and they left that Saturday morning. The whole day was just normal. Everything went like it usually does. When it was 11:30 p.m., my brother and I went upstairs to sleep. I put out the lights and locked the windows and doors. Everything still normal as usual. At about 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my dogs loudly barking. They do this very often because of the neighbor's cat walking around our house. I thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. Usually the dogs stop barking in about 5 minutes, but they never stopped. I thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. I got out of bed eventually and checked on my brother. He was still sleeping. I decided not to wake him up and walked downstairs to check things out myself. When I went downstairs, my dogs were barking towards the large kitchen window. This wasn't weird since a cat walks in our garden a lot too. I put a light on and walked around the kitchen to see if something was off, yet everything seemed fine. I then checked to see if my dogs were in pain or something, and they were not. I looked outside to see if the cat was walking around. The cat was nowhere in sight. This made me feel very uneasy. After this, I didn't feel like sleeping anymore, so I decided to sit down at the dinner table to watch some YouTube and chill out for a while. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel uneasy again. I had this odd feeling of being watched from the window. I decided it was better to shut the lights off and go back upstairs. Because I didn't feel safe, I grabbed a kitchen knife to protect myself if anything was about to happen. When I went upstairs, I checked my brother again. He was still safe and asleep. I sat down in our hallway so I could hear the things downstairs. After a while, my dog started barking again. At this point, I was very scared and I started crying. I decided to call the police and then walk downstairs. The police told me they would be here in 15 minutes. I made my way back downstairs as silently as possible. When I got into our hallway downstairs, I noticed that the light by our front door was on. This only goes on when people walk by, but I was stupid and shrugged it off as being the neighbor's cat. When I got back into the kitchen, my dog started barking. I turned the lights on and sat down again. Not a minute after I sat down, I noticed movement in our garden behind the large window. I froze. I couldn't move. My dog started barking like crazy because they could see the movement too. A large person was moving slowly towards the door. I still had the knife, but I am 15 and petite. This person looked a lot bigger than me, and I surely couldn't win a fight against him. He had to have seen me because he started moving faster towards the door. Fortunately, at this point, the police arrived. They knocked on the front door and I sprinted towards the door and let them in. The man most likely ran away because when the police investigated the backyard, there was no trace of him. Later, with the help of a police dog, the man was arrested and charged for attempted burglary. He apparently was arrested a few years before because of an attempted assault. My brother and I didn't get hurt and everything turned out fine, but I'm still scared to stay home alone. To the crazy man that tried to break into our house at night, let's not meet. Story number 3. For a little context, I just recently moved and live by myself for the first time. I live in a trailer because it's very cheap, but the area is a little on the sketchy side. I've been here for a month and nothing too strange has happened. Ever since I moved in, I keep hearing strange sounds around my home. Sounds like someone's creeping around near the not-so-thick walls of the trailer. There are a lot of stray cats around the area, so I pretty much come to ignore them, chalking it up to cats wandering around. Lately, I keep hearing sounds near the bathroom window. It almost sounds like someone's dragging a stick along the side of the wall outside. I have blackout curtains on every window, and the blinds are always closed. but the bathroom only has a sheer white curtain, and the window is that mottled textured glass that gives it a mosaic view if you look in. I'm equal parts dumb and cowardly, so I never peep out of my windows when I hear these weird noises. About a week ago, someone started banging on my door, and this was banging frantically. This is where me being a dumbass factors in. I debate answering the door, but then the banging suddenly stops. My stupid curiosity gets the better of me, and I open the door to a skinny man in dark clothing. It's 7 p.m. and the sun is almost completely set, so I can't make out his features. He's just standing there, turned back looking at me. I ask, "Do you need something?" He stared in my direction for a solid 10 seconds, and then just walked a few unsteady steps away. Then he turned back and looked at me and pointed up at the sky, wordlessly. He then turned his head up at the sky and stared up for a while. He then gave me one last look, turned away and meandered unsteadily down the unlit street. I closed and locked my front door, confused by the encounter. I had continued hearing the weird sounds outside my home, and actually started trying to glimpse through the sides of the curtains to find the cause, but still not courageous enough to actually draw them back and look right outside. Just about an hour ago, I heard the strange noise again in my bathroom, and then listened to it slowly travel to my bedroom window. My bathroom is connected to my room. The sound abruptly stopped for a time. Then I heard it very loud scrape along the wall to the bathroom, and then it was gone again. It's actually starting to freak me out, but of course it could just be the cats, and I could be overreacting. So strange man who I saw outside my home, who might be making these weird noises around my house. Let's never meet again. Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Tonight's video is another rendition of home invasion horror stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Stay sinful. Number 1. My name is Zach and I'm 20 years old, but this story happened to me when I was 15. It was a Friday night, I think, and I was up late playing NHL on Xbox 360. At one point I went to the bathroom, and when I came back I noticed something on my desk next to my Xbox. I have a Peyton Manning bobblehead, only the head was moving. Not a lot, just slightly. I thought that was weird, but brushed it off to me knocking the desk as I had gotten up. About 30 minutes later, I went downstairs to get myself a bowl of cereal. When I returned to playing my game, something had changed. I was playing as the Detroit Red Wings, but somehow it had changed to where I was playing as the Montreal Canadiens. I thought to myself, what's going on? I looked at my controller to see if it was switched off or broken. Basically anything to see how this happened. I changed the teams back and carried on playing. Maybe the controller was broken or whatever I thought. I got pretty tired and bored, so I decided to switch everything off and then take a shower and get ready to sleep. It took me around 15 minutes to do everything when I walked back into my bedroom. My Xbox was loaded back up. I stood there not confused, but now scared. The only person I live with is my dad, who is always asleep early, and he's not the kind of person who would play pranks, so I had nobody to suspect playing jokes on me. I slowly walked up to my Xbox and switched it all off again, with a confused and concerned look on my face. I had this paranoid feeling that someone was in my house messing with me. I got in bed, watched some YouTube, and tried to relax and forget about it. Eventually I fell asleep. I woke up sometime in the night by my TV blasting at a high volume. I hopped out of bed and immediately searched for the remote. I checked everywhere. I looked all over my bed, thinking I had left the remote in my sleep or something. It wasn't on my nightstand or my desk. Then suddenly the TV shut off. At that moment I was half asleep, tired and annoyed. I didn't sleep well for the rest of the night. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat and to see my bedroom window wide open. And as I stepped out of my bed, I stepped on my TV remote. How did it get there? It was not there last night. I then had this awful feeling to check under my bed. I looked under my bed and saw a big dark patch on the carpet. When I had a closer look, I saw it was damp, and there was muddy trainer footprints at the foot end of my bed. The way the damp patch looked was as if someone had been laying there in soaking wet clothes. I nearly threw up sick knowing someone had been under my bed that whole time messing with me. I told my dad, who told the police, but there wasn't anything anyone could do. I never got over that night from then to this day. I double-check every window, door, and lock before I sleep, and especially under my bed. Story number 2. My name is Aaron, and this story happened when I was 16 years old. I was home alone for one night as my parents were visiting family across the country. It was around 11 p.m., and I was downstairs watching NFL highlights on TV while eating some chips. We have a security camera in our backyard, and the way it works is when the camera picks up something, it's immediately shown on TV what's happening on the footage. Most of the time it will be a cat or a strong wind or something, and you have to wait a few seconds for the TV to come back on. As I was watching TV, the security camera kept showing up. The first few times were just the wind, but the third time I saw that the back gate had been opened. I didn't think much of it as it can come open sometimes, especially when the weather's bad. At that point I got up to take out the trash and close the gate. I continued watching my show. Like I said, the camera feed kept popping up and it became annoying. So against my parents' wishes, I decided to turn it off. I had to go upstairs to my dad's study. That was where the laptop was, that linked to the security camera, and where all the footage had been saved. Before disconnecting it from the TV, I decided to rewind the saved footage for no particular reason, and what I saw scared me to my soul. As I took out the garbage, my back was turned. I saw what appeared to be a hooded man sneak inside my house through the back door. The house suddenly filled with an intense silence. The man was somewhere in my house for all I know. He could have been right behind me watching me. It took so much courage to turn around, but he wasn't there. I took a peek out into the hall to see if I could see or hear anything. I then looked into the room opposite me, my bedroom, and there he was, the man from earlier hiding in the dark watching me. I screamed and shut the door to my dad's study. Thankfully, there was a lock on the door. The man then ran up to the door and started screaming and demanding that I open it. I could have ran to the phone and called the cops, but to be honest, I was too afraid to move away from the door, fearing he would break it down. The man eventually gave up and I heard him run off. I also saw the footage on the laptop that he ran through the backyard and out the gate. I rang the police and then my parents. All I knew from that incident was there had been reports of break-ins in our area, but that's it. No record of anyone being arrested. Sometimes wonder what would have happened to me if I didn't go into my dad's study, and what was the man really planning to do. Story number 3. My name's Alex and I'm 19 years old. I live with my mom. I usually get home from work at 3 p.m., and my mom would get home around 5 or 6. Most of the time I would have my headset on while playing my PlayStation. Last week on Tuesday I got home from work on time and sat down to play Black Ops 4. After playing for some time I got up to use the bathroom. Just as I did I heard the front door open and close. I called out downstairs, "Hey Mom," and I went to the bathroom. I got back to playing my game. The time was now 5:15. I then got a text from my mom saying, "I'm going to be home a little later. I'm bringing home Chinese food." I was so confused. I thought I heard my mom come in the door a minute ago. I texted my mom back saying, "Aren't you already home?" I waited nervously for her response. "No, I'm still at work." After reading this, a cold shiver went down my spine. I slowly walked out of the bedroom and took a few steps downstairs. "Hello?" I said in such a fearful voice. I couldn't see or hear anyone. I carried on walking slowly down the stairs. I spoke again. "Hello?" At this point, I thought I was just mistaken for what I heard earlier. I was about to turn around and head back upstairs. That was until I heard a voice call out to me. "In here." It sounded like a man's voice. I went down the few steps left and looked into the living room. There was a man sat down on our couch. He was bald and covered in tattoos. He then looked up at me with a malicious smile. I started to back away slowly, but as soon as I did, he got up and started chasing me. I ran up the stairs into the bedroom, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. I heard the man walking around outside the bedrooms. My first thought was he was going to rob or trash the place. He walked over to the bedroom door, where he figured I was, and stood there. I could see a shadow underneath the door. I was too afraid to do or say anything. He tried turning the door handle, and when it wouldn't open, surprisingly he just ran downstairs, and I heard the front door open and close. I wasn't sure if this was some kind of trap or not. Unfortunately, I didn't have my phone on me. I waited a while until I finally gathered up the courage to go back outside. I checked all the bedrooms. Surprisingly, nothing was trash or seemed to be missing. I called the police and checked downstairs. While doing so, I told the police what had happened and later told my mom. I doubt anything will happen as they haven't got too much to go on. That was until just now. It's 12:17 a.m., and I just received a text from an unknown number. It says, "You're lucky you were in the bathroom." It's pretty obvious who this came from. I'm going to call the police tomorrow. It scares me to think he didn't steal anything, and he only left the house when he couldn't get to me. And now he has my phone number and is still out there. I'm even paranoid he could be outside the house watching me. We'll update soon. Story number 4. I'm a Muslim and I am male. I live in Scotland, but I would rather not say where exactly, for obvious reasons. Now, as Muslims, a lot of us believe that anything relating to the supernatural are all caused by unknown beings known as jinns. They basically live alongside us, but we can't see, hear, smell, or interact with them. And just like us humans, there are good and bad ones. The good jinns keep to themselves, but the bad jinns are the ones that do all the nasty shit you hear in those horror stories. Though I would like to believe that some are just a little mischievous and like to mess with us from time to time just for kicks. Anyway, enough of that. I just wanted to give you an idea of what went through my mind during this moment. This was years ago, somewhere between 2009 and 2011. I was up at night in my bedroom playing Demon's Souls or Uncharted 2 on my PS3. I had my earphones on, but only on the one side, so I can still hear what's going on around me with the other ear. It's 2 a.m. when I clearly heard footsteps coming up the stairs. They weren't exactly quiet, but they weren't loud enough, but I still heard it as clear as day. At first I thought it was my dad, but then I remembered that everyone, including him, was asleep. I then thought that he must have woke up and went downstairs for something, and I just never noticed. Now, as soon as I heard it, I began counting the steps, as I just did that sometimes. However, I slowly began to realize that it wasn't my dad, as the footsteps were heavier, as if someone was wearing boots. My dad never wears boots, and neither does the rest of my family. So I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then nothing, not a sound. I sat there for a good minute wondering why they stopped at that point, because our staircase has 12 steps, not 7. Now my bedroom door faces directly towards the stairs with a banister in front, so you would have to go towards the left just to get downstairs. So if I opened my door, I would most likely see who it was that was standing there in the middle of the stairs, unless they were crouching down, meaning I would have to look over the banister just to see anything. I decided to check it out. I slowly but quietly got off my chair, crept towards my door, gently placed my right hand on the door handle, and took a few steps back before opening the door. I still didn't hear anything, so I know whoever it was had moved. I then quickly opened the door and stuck my head out of my bedroom, but I didn't see a damn thing. I then took a look over the banister and once again, nothing. I felt a little creeped out at this point because my dad was still asleep, and as I checked around the house, so was the rest of my family. All the windows and doors were locked, and I checked every hiding spot, didn't find anyone. Strangely enough, even though jinns came to mind, I felt a little better knowing no one was actually in my house. Still didn't stop me from running up the stairs to get back to my room, and looking behind me every now and then while I was gaming, fearing that a jinn might be standing right there. It's funny now when I think back on it, but at the time I definitely felt a little creeped out as I know it wasn't my imagination. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future videos. Make sure you stop on by the Sinful store. If you want any Sinful merch, my Teespring link is in the description box below. I've already got somebody that purchased a mug and a t-shirt. I want to thank you both, whoever those two people were. It makes me realize I need my own Stay Sinful mug. I know it's still summer, but fall's right around the corner. A nice cup of tea and some horror stories sounds good to me. Stay sinful.